Oh, is that you, Robert? Welcome back to another episode of Watercolor Fire Damage. I'm your host, Dan Merrick, artist. And this is the show where I paint a watercolor and then I sacrifice it. And today we're painting Saturn, the most photogenic planet of the solar system. Saturn is the second of two malefic planets. Mars, the bad boy. And then we've got Saturn. We're not allowed to talk about what Saturn's known for on YouTube. Saturn goes by a bunch of other names in cultures over the years. L, Kronos, Mr. Father Time, Father Christmas, a bearded old man that goes around at Christmas time, gives you gifts. There's this powerful hexagon shape that's associated with Saturn. So we've got this whole malevolent Father Time, you can't escape the black cube of Saturn sort of planet. We're just going with a super limited color palette this time. We're doing the burnt sienna and the ultramarine blue, and we're using a little bit of Payne's gray just to be able to push that value a little bit further. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and if we have time, we'll be able to fit in maybe one schizophrenic rabbit hole to go down. We're starting out with that ultramarine blue and burnt sienna mix, getting that going. This is such a beautiful looking black that you can get in watercolor. And the way that it granulates in the paper, because both of these pigments are granulated, oh, it looks so good. We've got a 11 by 17 size here, working on Arch's cold press paper to give me more time to work in these wet and wet washes. I'm getting the paper warmed up. We're getting all the water down in all the areas that we want the color to flow to, which is everything except for the planet and the rings. But you'll notice that on the back side, I have connected a little gap there. And that's because Saturn casts a shadow, and it casts a shadow onto its rings. So I want this area in this first initial wash, I want the color to be able to flow past this area and have it feel really dynamic. I'm starting with a wet and wet wash, so I'm not super worried that my holy water is a bit dingy. After all, we're gonna be moving towards a gray-black kind of color here. And burnt sienna and ultramarine blue are both these great colors at being able to kind of show their character. Their character has this way of popping out at different moments in the painting, which can really make a gray monochromatic painting feel really alive. I think you're gonna see by the end of this painting how it feels. It's pretty cool what you can get with just a handful of pigments. Okay, so an interesting thing about Saturn is that its rings are about 150,000 miles wide, but they're only about 30 feet thick. So that would be like if you were in a car and you drove around the equator of the Earth 6 times on a 2-lane road. That's kind of the proportion that we've got with these rings of Saturn, just whoosh, like this huge mass that's super paper thin. Okay, so we're starting with another wet and wet wash on the planet itself this time. It's our second wash. And we're kind of doing the same sort of idea here. We're gonna get some real faded, blurry lines, some value areas that we're gonna start mapping out, then we'll push it darker later. We're starting out light and thin, and then we're gonna be going thick and dark. And then I'm mixing up that same gray color, but I'm pushing it to the burnt sienna side, so we're actually gonna get kind of a coffee latte sort of color that we're gonna be using and putting onto Saturn. It's known for kind of having this creamy sort of look to it. So the winds on Saturn blow really fast. They blow, I think they top out at like 1,100 miles per hour. So that's like 1,800 kilometers an hour that they're blowing like all the time, right? So you get these crazy jet streams, and that's where you see with some of these gas giants, you see these bands of color, and that's because the wind is just going crazy inside it. It's get these jet streams that form, and it's like where the particles are ascending and descending kind of in these big structures, these big cloud fronts, you know, going around the planet. That's kind of what we got going on here. Again, Saturn's huge compared to the Earth. It's much bigger than the Earth. It's another gas giant. And something that's really interesting about Saturn is that for ever since like back into antiquity, like the earliest, you know, cultures associated Saturn with the black cube of Saturn. That terminology comes up a lot in symbols and stuff. And we're just like, okay. And then we sent a probe past it. I think it was in the 80s, in 1981. We sent a probe past and it was able to take pictures of the North Pole. And the North Pole of Saturn has this massive hexagon-shaped hurricane that's going on constantly, all the time. And we sent other probes past, and that storm has never moved. It's always stayed right at the North Pole. If you kind of look at a hexagon, it almost looks like a cube that you're looking at from like the top. Now, we've been able to recreate a storm like this in a lab at home, so we know how it's made. But it's just interesting because these older cultures didn't have instruments like they didn't have telescopes and things like that. So how did they know that this planet had this hexagon shape, or that was even a thing that would be talked about and be a part of Saturn? And then in 1981, we actually go past and take a picture, and on the North Pole, there's a hexagon. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. Each side of the hexagon-shaped hurricane is about the size of Earth. So if you imagine an Earth going, that size going to each point on the hexagon, that's kind of what we got going on Saturn on the top here. Okay, so there's 3 sets of rings here, and the names of the rings are ring set A, set B, and you guessed it, set C. But there is this gap called the Cassini division, and that's because this guy Giovanni Cassini discovered this. He was the first guy to discover this gap between the rings. So we're painting that in. We're making sure to have that gap in there. That'll make it feel more like Saturn. Now, past Dan would have probably gotten out a French curve and made sure that these ellipses of the rings of Saturn were perfect. And there would have been a lot of like sweating about it and tears. And that's just not part of my brand anymore. Like it's a scary thing to watercolor. Like sometimes you're like hours into a piece and you're just like, man, like you just kind of have to commit. And I feel like that makes me grow more. Like in Photoshop, when you're painting in Photoshop, if you make a mistake, you can undo infinitely. There's no cost, like there's no commitment. You're always gonna be making mistakes in traditional art. There's always gonna be these little things that happen. And it's almost like working on the skill of being able to improvise when that happens is really appealing to me. So that's one of the things I really like about this is going in and just kind of trying to freehand everything. Later you'll see a different technique that I tried out where I actually do like like connect the dots. Like I connect the dots down to help me guide when I'm doing my the rings later on. One of the things that you can do, that you can practice when doing this, is pulling from your elbow and your shoulder when you're drawing. This sort of movement is something that I was very stubborn about learning. I always drew from my wrist when I was in a sketchbook, and I had a teacher in my 30s that said, you really need to start learning to do this, and I was just kind of like, whatever. And Andrew was like, you know, I was stubborn about this too until my 40s. You might as well just try to do it now. And I was like, oh, okay. And oh no, flying too close to the sun for no reason. Like this could have just been a different wash, you know? But I was like, oh, I could do it all in one shot. And then I touched the pools together, and you've got this big color spilling out onto the North Pole, pretty much, of Saturn. But I cleaned it up. I used a paper towel, and I'm able to stop it. And now we ironically have this happy accident where we've got this cool tone hanging out in this warm tone of the planet of Saturn, which it does look kind of cool. So in the background, I want the contrast to be darker. So if the background is darker, the planet is going to seem more like it is shining in contrast to that. So if you're just kind of like, if you have some areas that you haven't painted that are white in your painting, and you're like, man, they don't feel like they're glowing. First of all, I would look at photo reference and make a sketch from that, and just kind of plan out where your values are going to go. And then when you're doing these layers, sometimes you have to make sure you've got some real blacks on the painting to be able to make the areas that are white seem like they're that white. So I'm just coming in here with a thin brush, and I'm just dragging these colors around. I'm just smoothing and feathering out these edges. So the clean water I'm adding here could end up leaving slight hard edges when the water dries. But this is something I'm not super worried about. And if I wanted to, I could come back in with like an eradicator brush after it dried and I could lift those slight hard edges out. All right, so now I'm just adding some holy water to the planet after the last wash is dried. And the goal here is just to kind of come in with a cool gray mix, and then we're gonna start charging a lot of colors in. We're gonna do the cool gray mix, and then we're gonna do like thicker burnt sienna, and then we might even try coming in there with ultramarine blue just to kind of get some variety in there. The goal here is to start shading the planet. We know that the shadow is being cast in this picture to the right, so the shadows are also going to go to the right because the light source is the sun, which is going to be coming from the left. So Saturn is a very popular image used in logos and brand names and companies, and I think that probably just has to do with the fact that out of all the planets in our solar system, it's the most recognizable. When you're designing a logo, you want the symbol and the shape of it, the outline of it, the silhouette. You want that silhouette to be a very recognizable shape because people are driving their cars going 60 miles an hour. They might see your billboard just for a second. And so you need something that really stands out, which I think is why Saturn is used in a lot of logos more than the other planets. And there are a lot of businesses that use different planet names. Like we got Mars candy bars. AT&T uses the world in its logo. We've got this entertainment company from the 90s called Jupiter Entertainment. But by far, Saturn seems to be the planet that's used the most. That and the Earth. So we've got the Earth used in tons of logos. We've got Saturn used in just as many. There's the Sci-Fi Channel. The old logo was Saturn. There's the Sega Saturn. The old Internet Explorer logo was Saturn. DirecTV's logo, Capital One's logo, Boeing's logo. There was even a car company called Saturn. It's no longer around anymore. And then if you want to talk about like the black cube of Saturn or hexagons, I mean, that's a very simple shape, so obviously that shape is going to appear in many logos, but you've got, you had Sega Saturn, which is a game system, and then you have the Nintendo 64, which the N looks very much like a black cube, which is then followed by the next system for Nintendo, which is called the GameCube, which is a black cube for their logo. And the little animation that you get at the beginning of the GameCube is this, the logo's dancing around, and ultimately it gets trapped in the center of this cube. So when you're talking about this sort of thing, you need to reference pareidolia, which is this phenomenon that happens. It's a mental condition where people start to see patterns and recognize grand connections between seemingly random things. So you got to just kind of like remember, it's like, this stuff is just for fun. It's just talking about for fun. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was this figure, Jack Parsons. So Jack Parsons was a founding member of Jet Propulsion Laboratories that invented Saturn V rockets that were used for the Apollo missions to go to the moon. Jack's real name is not Jack. His mom changed his name to John legally when she split from his dad. So his real first name was Marvel. So Marvel Parsons ends up becoming Jack Parsons. He's like this real crazy kid, was always by himself all the time. And he started doing all these magical rituals that he learned in Amazing Comics when he was a kid. So his mom sends him off to this military school to try to straighten him out. And he gets expelled from the school because he was blowing up the toilets. So through a series of events, he ends up meeting up with these two other guys, and they form JPL. And they're kind of working with Caltech, and they're doing all these experiments. This was like the 1930s and the 1940s. So, I mean, when I think about that time period, I think about people being like more conservative, not engaging in like risky behavior as compared to like something like the 60s, right? But it turns out Jack and his buddies were engaging in all sorts of substances all the time while they were conducting these experiments with gunpowder. So the experiments that they were conducting were so frightening. Their neighbors at Caltech branded them the term the Suicide Squad because they were so worried about what they were doing. So Jack goes on with JPL and his buddies. He ends up going on to invent these rocket engines that is used in the Saturn V rockets. And Jack is known to practice these occult rituals before every test of these engines. So one of the things he would do is he would loudly read the hymn to Pan by Aleister Crowley before each one of these tests, which just is like so crazy to me because like whenever I think about like science, they're a very rational person, just show me the evidence, I just want to see the details. And then you have this person who was the father of modern rocket technology who is crazy. And then it's just kind of funny that the rockets are called the Saturn rockets, right? So Jack ends up becoming wealthy from the money from JPL, and Jack ends up buying this property in Pasadena. He starts renting out rooms in this property to artists and anarchists and all sorts of different people. This science fiction writer, L. Ron Hubbard, ends up moving in, and Jack and L. Ron Hubbard, they hit it off. They start performing all these rituals together. Aleister Crowley then starts to get involved, where Jack is sending him letters and there's correspondence that we have between them going back and forth. L. Ron Hubbard ends up stealing Jack Parsons's partner and $10,000. And then shortly after that, Hubbard ends up founding Scientology and Dianetics. And then Jack died when he was 37 because he blew himself up doing a science experiment. Now, one of the things I want to do in this wash is I want to clean up the rings of Saturn. We've had some fun experiments being very artistic, right? And so I want to come in with the permanent white Holbein Artists gouache, and I'm just kind of cleaning up some of these rings. I'm just kind of making some changes to them. I'm just finessing them a little bit and making them feel more, there's always opportunities when you're doing watercolor to make adjustments and make changes. When I first started learning watercolor, I thought it was a very unforgiving medium, and it is. But there's also more wiggle room than you think that you have when you first start. So I'm gonna come in here, I'm making some changes with gouache, and we're just gonna be using the same gouache later for the stars in the background. Now I'm using that gouache again, the permanent white from Holbein. And I'm gonna be coming in here and I'm adding stars, and I wanna do it in a way that kind of makes it feel like there's a lot of stars when you look at the painting, but when you actually observe the individual stars, they're kind of laid out in a pattern that just leads your eye through the piece. So we've kind of got this background that feels swirly, right? Or like these eruptions happening from the North Pole and the South Pole. And then what I'm doing is I'm just kind of adding stars in where there's a lot of contrast in the background, where they will pop out. I don't really want to add the stars that much in the lighter areas of the background. And the stars are kind of used as just an abstract tool to promote movement through the piece. Man, I feel kind of icky about this painting after talking about all the imagery that Saturn's used for. This poor planet. This planet's not doing anything. And everyone's just like, it's evil, it's wrong, let's use it, let's do rituals to it. You know what I mean? So we're definitely gonna have to burn this one at the end. You gotta get rid of this. I was also listening to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon while I was painting this. So I was kind of in that sort of like cosmic state that you get into when you listen to Pink Floyd. And that also greatly influenced this background and kind of the design that I was going for. I wanted it to be something that just kind of happened in the moment. All right, so that's it. We exorcised the planet. We cast all the demons out of it. We got rid of it. This is actually my favorite painting from the series so far. Like, I really, really didn't want to burn this one. This one looked really cool. So if you want to get prints of it, those are available in various sizes on my website. I'm gonna have the ashes of Saturn available as well, but I'd rather just have you watch another video.